Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions, the mystery of Operation Paperclip, how the United States secretly recruited Nazi scientists after World War II. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction. Not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. In the final months of World War II in Europe, as Allied forces advanced into Germany from the east and west, a race was underway that the public would not hear about for decades. The United States Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, JIOA, was deploying teams of scientists, soldiers, and intelligence officers across defeated Germany with a specific mission: find the Nazi scientists who had developed the weapons that nearly won the war for the Third Reich, and recruit them for American service before the Soviets got them. The program was called Operation Overcast and was later renamed Operation Paperclip, because the identifying paperclip on a file indicated a scientist being considered for recruitment. The men they were recruiting were not innocent bystanders to the Nazi regime. Many had been members of the SS or the Nazi Party. Some had used slave labor from concentration camps in their factories and laboratories. Some had been directly complicit in medical experiments on concentration camp prisoners. Wernher von Braun, who would become the most famous of the paperclip scientists and the father of the American space program, had been an SS-Sturmbannführer who used slave labor from the Dora concentration camp in the underground factories where his V-2 rockets were built. His rockets killed thousands of people in London. After the war, he worked for NASA and received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Operation Paperclip was not a secret forever. It was eventually declassified and is now well documented in the historical record, including Annie Jacobson's comprehensive 2014 history. Operation Paperclip, the secret intelligence program that brought Nazi scientists to America. But the operation raises questions that have not been resolved by the historical disclosure. How many scientists were recruited? What information did they bring? Were their war crimes adequately investigated or ignored? And what did the United States gain from the arrangement? And what did it sacrifice in moral authority by recruiting the engineers of genocide into its space and weapons programs? This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we go further, if you are finding this investigation compelling, please take a moment right now to like this video, drop a comment below with your thoughts, and share it with someone who loves a good historical mystery. If you are watching on YouTube, hit subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss a new episode. If you found us through Facebook, tap follow on our page. It takes just a few seconds, and it genuinely helps us keep making these documentaries. Now, let us get back to the investigation. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the landscape of modern documented mysteries, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Governments keep secrets. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is documented fact, confirmed by declassified archives, freedom of information disclosures, and the confessions of officials long after the events in question. The United States government ran secret programs to test psychedelic drugs on unwitting civilians culture, to spy on its own citizens, COINTELPRO, and to cover up nuclear testing incidents that killed American soldiers. The British government suppressed information about UFO encounters by military personnel for decades. The Soviet Union systematically falsified scientific data to maintain ideological conformity. None of this means that every government secret involves supernatural phenomena or alien contact. The reality of classified programs is almost always more mundane. Military technology being tested covertly, intelligence operations that cannot be publicly acknowledged, or simply the bureaucratic instinct to classify first and justify later. Most UFO sightings that turn out to have official explanations were classified aircraft. Most government denials of anomalous phenomena are straightforwardly honest. The phenomena being denied are simply not real. But the documented history of government secrecy has a practical effect on investigative credibility. When officials deny knowledge of events that witnesses describe in compelling detail, that denial cannot be taken at face value without independent corroboration. The proven track record of institutional concealment means that institutional denial, however authoritative it sounds, is not the same as evidence of absence. This complicates every modern mystery that touches on official narrative. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter, the core evidence surrounding Operation Paperclip, how the United States secretly recruited Nazi scientists after World War II is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. Operation Paperclip officially ran from 1945 to 1959 and brought approximately 600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians to the United States. The operation targeted specialists in rocketry, aviation, chemistry, medicine, and weapons technology. Participants were placed in positions at military installations, NASA, universities, and private defense contractors. The operation was conducted under the authority of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and was approved at the presidential level, initially by President Truman, who specified that no individuals with known Nazi Party membership or war crime involvement should be recruited, and then by President Eisenhower, under whose administration the screening requirements were significantly relaxed in practice. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes, but as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly, it is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the screening standards that Truman specified were systematically circumvented by the JIOA. The OSS precursor to the CIA, the Army, and other agencies had intense interest in the scientists' technical knowledge and were willing to overlook or actively falsify background information. The standard procedure became to classify the original security reports, which contained the scientists' actual Nazi Party and SS memberships, and prepare new, sanitized biographical files that omitted the damaging information. The sanitized files were then used to prepare immigration visas for the scientists. This falsification of records was not peripheral to Operation Paperclip. It was the operational method for bypassing the official screening requirements. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine Wernher von Braun, 1912-1977, is the most famous paperclip recruit. Born into Prussian aristocracy, von Braun became fascinated with rocketry as a teenager and joined both the Verein für Raumschifffahrt, Society for Space Travel, and eventually the Nazi Party, joined in 1937, and the SS, joined in 1940, rising to the rank of Sturmbannführer. The V-2 rocket program he led was built using approximately 60,000 concentration camp prisoners from Dora Mittelbau, later Mittelbau Dora, of whom approximately 20,000 died from exhaustion, starvation, and execution. Von Braun was aware of the conditions. He visited the underground factories on multiple occasions. In the United States, he directed the development of the Redstone missile and the Saturn V rocket that carried Apollo astronauts to the moon. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, other significant paperclip recruits include Hubertus Strughold, who became the father of space medicine in the US, but had prior knowledge of or involvement in the Dachau hypothermia and altitude experiments in which concentration camp prisoners were tortured and killed. Walter Schreiber, who had been involved in administering wartime human experiments on concentration camp prisoners and was eventually forced out of the US after being exposed. And Arthur Rudolph, who had been production manager at Dora Mittelbau and designed the Saturn V rocket, but was eventually investigated by the Office of Special Investigations, OSI, and agreed to leave the US and renounce his citizenship in 1984 rather than face deportation proceedings. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of the Soviet equivalent of paperclip was Operation Overcast, conducted by Soviet intelligence, NKVD, in October 1946, which forcibly deported approximately 2,000-3,000 German scientists, engineers, and technicians with their families to the Soviet Union, while the American operation recruited voluntarily, though the volunteers often had limited alternatives. The Soviet operation was a compulsory deportation. The German scientists brought to the Soviet Union were central to Soviet ballistic missile and nuclear weapons programs. The competition between American and Soviet efforts to recruit German technical expertise effectively launched the Cold War arms race and the space race simultaneously. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding: the immigration status of paperclip scientists was eventually regularized through a variety of mechanisms, including visa adjustments and congressional bills. Many were naturalized as US citizens. Their involvement in war crimes was never systematically prosecuted. The OSI, established in 1979 specifically to investigate Nazi war criminals in the US, eventually investigated some paperclip scientists, but successfully prosecuted only a handful. The fundamental deal offered by paperclip, technical knowledge in exchange for immunity from prosecution, was never officially reversed, though individual cases were addressed after the OSI's establishment. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain Operation Paperclip. How the United States secretly recruited Nazi scientists after World War II. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the pragmatic necessity theory is the defense most often offered for Operation Paperclip. The United States faced an existential threat from the Soviet Union. The German scientists possessed knowledge critical to American defense and space capabilities, and recruiting them was a necessary compromise with moral idealism in the interest of national survival. Under this model, the decision to bring von Braun and others to America, despite their Nazi involvement, was a rational calculation that their contributions to American security outweighed the moral costs. Proponents note that the Saturn V rocket and the American space program's achievements are direct products of the paperclip recruitment. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the moral corruption theory holds that Operation Paperclip represented a fundamental betrayal of the values the United States claimed to be defending in World War II, and that the recruitment of Nazi war criminals set a precedent for the prioritization of tactical advantage over ethical principle that has continued to characterize American intelligence and military operations. Under this model, the decision to welcome men who used slave labor and participated in medical experiments on concentration camp prisoners into positions of honor and reward sent a clear message about the real hierarchy of American values, that technical utility outweighs human rights. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the hidden influence theory, held by some researchers, proposes that the paperclip scientists' influence on American science and technology was broader than officially acknowledged, that aspects of American military, medical, and aerospace research in the 1950s, 1980s were more directly influenced by German wartime research, including unethical human experimentation results, than has been officially admitted. Under this model, some American research programs were essentially laundered continuations of Nazi programs, with the German origins concealed to avoid both moral criticism and legal liability. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding Operation Paperclip, how the United States secretly recruited Nazi scientists after World War II, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes the declassified Operation Paperclip records, now available at the National Archives, include the original security reports, which documented Nazi Party and SS membership, and the sanitized substitute files prepared for the immigration process. These parallel files are themselves documentary evidence of the systematic falsification that was the operational core of Paperclip. The original files document the scientists' actual histories, while the substitute files show what was presented to immigration authorities. The comparison between the two sets of files is the most damning evidence for the deliberate circumvention of Truman's stated screening requirements. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented Annie Jacobson's 2014 book Operation Paperclip, which draws on declassified materials from the National Archives, the CIA, and multiple other government archives, is the most comprehensive synthesis of the documentary evidence available. Jacobson documents specific cases of record falsification, identifies the officials responsible for authorizing the circumvention of screening requirements, and traces the subsequent careers of specific paperclip scientists and the ethical compromises their recruitment entailed. The book's reliance on primary documents from multiple archives provides a level of evidentiary rigor unusual in the popular history genre. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed the 1984 OSI investigation of Arthur Rudolph and his subsequent agreement to renounce U.S. citizenship and leave the country is documentary evidence that the U.S. government eventually acknowledged the insufficiency of its original screening process. Rudolph, who had received NASA Distinguished Service Medal in 1969 for his work on the Saturn V, was found by the OSI to have been directly responsible for the use of concentration camp labor at Dora Mittelbau, and to have been present during beatings and executions of prisoners. His departure is the most significant case where the original paperclip immunity was effectively retrospectively withdrawn. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding Operation Paperclip, how the United States secretly recruited Nazi scientists after World War II. Now, we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. Operation Paperclip is now thoroughly documented in the historical record and is taught in U.S. history curricula as an example of the moral compromises of Cold War policy. The U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum has included paperclip-related materials in its exhibitions, and the moral dimensions of the operation are regularly discussed in the context of accountability for war crimes and the treatment of Nazi perpetrators in the post-war period. The operation's most famous product, the Apollo space program and the Saturn V rocket, is now publicly acknowledged to have been built on German wartime rocket technology and personnel with Nazi war crime involvement. NASA has addressed this history with varying degrees of candor. Von Braun's biography is regularly taught as a complex moral case study. The man who sent humans to the moon was also the man who used slave labor to build weapons that killed thousands of civilians in London. The paperclip history does not resolve these tensions. It documents them and leaves the moral accounting to each reader. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of Operation Paperclip, how the United States secretly recruited Nazi scientists after World War II, from the historical record through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Operation Paperclip ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please help us reach more people. If you are watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new documentary. If you are watching on Facebook, tap the follow button on our page to stay connected. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.